Good morning, Chairman.
Good morning and welcome to the first meeting of the Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee in this new council term. My name is Councillor Rob Kendrick and I'm the chairman of the committee. Welcome to all members in attendance today. Obviously, as this is the start of a new term, we have some new faces on the committee, so it's good to welcome you all this morning, and I hope you find it an interesting and rewarding experience being on this committee. And also to all officers, welcome, both in the council chamber, on Teams, fingers crossed that it's all going to work. The video feed of this meeting is being broadcast via the County Council's website, and I'd also like to welcome members of the press and public who are watching our meeting online today. We also have Councillor Mrs Patricia Bradwell, Executive Councillor for Children's Services, Community Safety and Procurement, and Councillor Stephen Rowe, her Executive Support Councillor, attending today in the Council Chamber, so welcome again to both of you. Welcome to the following senior officers from the Children's Services who are present in the Council Chamber today. Heather Sandy, Executive Director for Children's Services, Joe Kavanagh, Assistant Director for Early Help, and Martin Smith, Assistant Director for Children's Education. I'd like to begin with a health and safety announcement. There is no fire drill planned for this morning. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, we need to leave the council chamber through the rear doors and leave the building through the reception into the front car park. We then need to wait in the car park until further instructions. Can I please remind everyone that their mobiles and other devices should be on silent. Also, when invited to speak, can you please ensure you switch your microphone on, otherwise officers attending the meeting via Teams and also members of the press and public listening to our meeting online won't be able to hear you. Please be aware that the microphones are very sensitive and can pick up nearby noise when switched on. If you wish to ask a question during the course of the meeting, can you please raise your hand? My right-hand man, the Vice Chairman, Councillor William Gray, will make a note of those who wish to speak. And that's very important that you do that. So if we can now move on to the business on the agenda for this morning's meeting. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Rob, do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. So we've received apologies from Councillor Killy, who was sub-Councillor Parker, but we've also received apologies from Councillor Cook and Mrs Matchin. Thank you.
Thank you. And I understand that Councillor Colin Matthews will need to leave the meeting at around 11 to attend a briefing. So, but hopefully he will return later. Item 2 is declarations of members' interests. Members of the committee are reminded that they only need to declare any relevant interests which have not been declared on their declaration of pecuniary interests form. Do any members wish to declare an interest? No? Thank you. We move on to item 3 now, minutes of the Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee held on March the 5th this year. This is to confirm and sign the minutes from the meeting of the committee on March the 5th as a correct record. Do I have a proposer, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to propose those.
Thank you, Councillor Whittington. And a seconder? Councillor Matthews. Thank you very much. All those in favour, if you'd raise your hand, please. Those against? Abstentions? Thank you. That's the minutes agreed. We now move on to item 4, which are announcements by the Chairman, Executive Councillors and Chief Officers. Firstly, my announcements. During July, there will be 3 workshops held for the committee members. This is actually an innovation. I can't recall we've done it before, so we're breaking new ground here. As I say, there will be 3 workshops held for committee members, which will focus in more detail on different service areas under each Assistant Director in Children's Services. Starting with Janice Spencer, Assistant Director for Children's Safeguarding, who will be holding a workshop on safeguarding and children's health. Joe Kavanagh, Assistant Director for Early Help, we're holding a workshop on early help and commissioning. And Martin Smith, Assistant Director for Children's Education, will be holding a workshop on education and schools. Dates for these sessions are currently being identified and appointments will be sent out to the committee members shortly. I think this is a very good innovation and I hope all members will take advantage of it. And just to make everyone aware, I'm intending to have a 10-minute comfort break at the end of item 6 on your agenda today, just so we can clear our heads, as it were, before we go into the rest of the business of the meeting. Moving on, are there any Executive Councillor announcements, Councillor Mrs Bradwell?
No, I would have announced, obviously, the mental health funding we've got, but it is, I think members probably know, and I think it's on the agenda today, isn't it? No? No?
Trying to
No?
remember.
Okay, well, I'll tell you about it then. Sorry about that. I thought it was. Yes, so the council's received £2.5 million, and that was a bid put in by CCG, LPFT and ourselves to help young people who've really struggled with the pandemic, really, and it's really affected some young people, you know, dramatically. So it's really, we do have our CAMS service, which is there, but actually this additional funding will really help to be able to focus more on those young people, and that can be young people who are every young person, but we have had quite a number of issues with children who are in care. We had a number of children who are in foster care who their foster carers were self-isolated, so we had to put them into residential. It's all sorts of small problems and not unsurmountable, I don't think, if these young people do get the right help. I believe with having this additional funding, that really will make a difference for our young people. So that's just happened over the last week. Obviously, lots going on, and that it will take a little time, I think, for you to get your head around it all, because Children's Services does cover a wide range of issues. But I'm sure, you know, over time, you will feel that you, going back to where you represent, you can sometimes understand things a bit more when you get queries from parents and that. And I'm sure you will get queries from parents about all sorts of things. But I'm here, I've got Stephen, and obviously Heather and her team as well are always there to give you advice. So if ever you're worried about anything, if you email any of us, you know, we are here, and I can't always give you that professional advice, but I can point you in the right direction. That's really to new councillors. I'm not talking to people who've been here a while, but you know, we are here to help and guide you, because it is a big area, and that. So that's all I've got to say, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'd endorse what you say, that yourself and the officer team are more than helpful for members with our queries and questions, and don't hesitate to go to them if there's something you're unclear of. Again, that's especially for the newer members for the committee. Are there any chief officer announcements? Heather?
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to say a big welcome to the new members and reiterate that we're very much here to help you to do your role in any way that we can. Thank you.
Thanks very much. If there are no further announcements, we'll move on to agenda item 5, which is Introduction to Children's Services. This item is to provide members of the committee with an overview of children's services, and we'll be receiving a presentation from Heather Sandy, Executive Director. So it's over to you, Heather.
Thanks again, Chairman. So as we've already talked about, children's services is a complex area of the council's work. So I'm going to go through some slides which some of you have seen before if you attended the induction session. The Chairman and I discussed it, and we felt because there was such a lot on there was no harm in revisiting it in this environment so that we can ask questions and explore that further. Thank you, Tracy. So yes, my name's Heather Sandy. I'm the Executive Director for Children's Services. My role is commonly referred to as the DCS. You'll hear that talked about a lot. And I was appointed as DCS in March 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic. So I've had a really interesting start to my role. Prior to that, I was the Assistant Director for Education, and I've been working with the Council for 5 years now. So my appointment has ensured stability within children's services and has meant that the leadership team have been able to drive forward on our innovation despite the pandemic. And we're really quite unique in that. There's not many local authorities that have continued to innovate during the pandemic, and we look forward to sharing those innovations with you through this Scrutiny Committee and inviting scrutiny on them at the appropriate time. As you'll all be aware, our lead member for Children's Services is Councillor Mrs Patricia Bradwell, and I'll talk a little bit about what that means in terms of her statutory responsibilities. And you'll all know Lincolnshire as a location well. It's a big, beautiful rural county. We're very proud of it. It does present us with lots of challenges. It can take 2 hours to drive from one side of Lincolnshire to the other, which means that we have to think really carefully about how we organise our services. And we tend to organise our services in 4 quadrants, so that we have all of our services co-located in those quadrants in order to be able to serve families better. This slide is showing you our vision for children's services. It's putting children first, and we want to make sure that everybody is working together for all children to ensure that they can be as happy, healthy, safe, and the best that they can be. And that's really important because children's services is a partnership endeavour. You've got a partnership presentation a little bit later, and it's really important that all partners are working together to put children first. Thank you, Tracy. So children's services is sometimes referred to as social services. That's what we used to be called. And the social care element of our work is really important and significant. But the vast majority of families that you're serving will never come into contact with our social care services. We have a broader set of services, which includes our schools, our early years settings, health visiting, children's centres, special educational needs services, which provide support to a much larger group of families, if not each and every one of them in some way. We use the term universal services to describe services which all families access, and that can be our own and other services, such as schools, GPs and health visiting. And we have a set of services which give extra support, such as our special educational needs services, our youth offending services, and our early help services. And we refer to them as early help, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. Thank you. So as I've said, the work we do in children's services relies closely on partnership working, and you're having your partnership presentation. Effective safeguarding and supporting children to thrive can only be achieved through that partnership working, and that means something for you as well in terms of your role as an elected member. You have a responsibility to play in protecting children. I want to be clear that children's services and children's safeguarding is heavily regulated. All of the work that we do and the decisions that we make are defined within a legal framework. The primary legislation we have to work to is the Children and Families Act of 1989 and 2004. There are various other pieces of legislation and guidance, the most important one being the Working Together to Safeguard Children. And what that means is that all of our decisions are made within a framework that has to be defensible in law, because often we're before the courts to have our decisions affirmed. Children's Services is also inspected by both Ofsted and the Quality Care Commission, and that's a rigorous and challenging process, and in fact we're judged to be outstanding by Ofsted in Children's Services, which puts us amongst the very best in the country. Thanks, Tracy. So this is the kind of pyramid of our intervention, and I've talked a little about universal services, and there's a wide range of those available in Lincolnshire dependent on a child's age and need. There's different universal services. At Lincolnshire County Council, we're involved in the delivery of early years education. We're involved in supporting and challenging schools to ensure that they're delivering a good quality of education. We have a health visiting service, our children and young people's nurses, our children's centres, and much, much more actually. And when Jo does her workshop, you'll be able to find out a lot more about those services. It's important to note again, and I will keep emphasising this, for the vast majority of families in Lincolnshire, those are the services that they interact with, and those are the services that they use. We then move to early help. Early help means providing extra support as soon as need emerges. So that might be when the child's an adolescent. It doesn't necessarily mean early years. Early help means as soon as we see that somebody needs some extra support, the professionals around them get involved, come together to think about how we do that. And that is called the Team Around the Child in Lincolnshire. And what we do is we complete an early help assessment to let us know what those child's needs are, and we identify the services that need to be around them. And we also identify a lead professional, and that might be a teacher in school, it might be a nursery years teacher, it might be one of our own staff, but it's definitely a partnership arrangement. Now, families do have to agree to have an early help assessment and be part of a team around the child. They don't have to take that support on. And if a family decide not to take up the offer of help, but a professional still's worried about the child or the situation the family's in, they can make a referral to Children's Services. And that potentially could take us further up that pyramid to the child in need section. So the child in need, if a child's assessed as having more significant or complex needs, then they may be classed as a child in need. They'll receive extra help and services from children's services depending on what those needs are. Sometimes it can be that a child has complex disabilities. Sometimes it can be that we're concerned about the safety of the child and the child's ability to thrive in the environment that they're in. The aim of the child in need process is to keep the child safe, well cared for and at home wherever that is in their best interests. We have policies and procedures in place to define which children are classed as needing extra support, and every child in need has a plan which maps out what everyone involved in that plan needs to do, which does include the family themselves and often the child if they're of an appropriate age to engage in that. So working through the child in need process, we're always hoping to de-escalate need and move back down the pyramid. That's the aim all of the time in children's services, to move children back to universal services. However, sometimes we need to escalate that to child in protection, or we have a referral which suggests that a child might be at risk of harm. So if we receive that referral, we are honour bound by law to investigate that. Most often that will involve seeing and speaking to the child and their family and the professionals involved in the child's life. If the child is then thought to be at risk of significant harm, a child protection plan will be drawn up. That sets out what will be provided to the child and family and how their progress will be monitored. And there'll be regular meetings as we move through that. And again, hopefully that will address the concerns and we can move back down the pyramid and back towards universal services. Unfortunately, sometimes those concerns aren't addressed and those issues around the child's welfare can't be resolved, and children's services have to consider applying for a care order, which is where we remove the child from the family's care or secure another legal outcome. When a child comes into the care of the local authority, they're called a child in care or a looked after child. You'll hear that language. Our children have been clear they want to be called a child in care rather than a looked after child. So we're working really hard to ensure that we use that language wherever possible. It's important, again, to emphasise that whilst we are showing the escalation within this pyramid, very often we're able to de-escalate and support families to address the concerns that we've got. Also, though, if at any time we receive a referral of form and the child's not on the pyramid, but the risk of harm is significant, we can move straight to the court end of that pyramid as well, into those pre-proceedings. Again, vast majority of children don't come anywhere near that process. Thanks, Tracy. So the principles of our work with families are really important. I've described the services that we give, and I'm sure you can understand that for families engaged in those, it's quite a traumatic event if you get towards the top end of that pyramid. So it's really important that we work with families in a really effective way. We know that relationships are key to change, and we strive to work with families and not do to them. Our practice is developed to ensure that wherever possible, we are supporting families and the wider family network to come to their own solutions and then testing it out to make sure it's safe. We have extremely strong partner agency relationships, and we have a genuine attitude in Lincolnshire that we're in this together and that the child's at the heart of the decision making, and we get a lot of feedback about that. In all the work we do, we work towards outcomes, so we're very clear what the next step is, even if that's a small step, and we're open and honest because we know communication is key. But it may be that there are times when families come to you because they are upset about the interaction that our teams are having, and you can raise them to us and you can encourage the families to talk to us as well. In Lincolnshire, we're restorative in approach. We work with the whole family and we look at the family's strengths and we look for solutions. So we work hard to ensure that we're looking as much as what the strengths are around the child as well as what the worries are. Thanks, Tracy. Lincolnshire Children's Services do benefit from a stable political and professional leadership team. Our lead member, I think, has been in post for 15 years. She might correct me. And as I said, I was appointed as director in 2020 after 5 years at the council. We have a very strong, dynamic, integrated leadership team across the second and third tier. And they are highly driven, highly experienced, and they've got a proven track record of delivering change. You'll see that as they come to present to you. You'll see how passionate they are and how hard they work to get things right, and they're very open to scrutiny and to continuing to do that. We're definitely on a journey of continuous improvement. Thanks. So this slide is just sharing with you the senior team. We've got a vacant post at the moment for our AD for Children's Health, which is being covered by somebody in public health called Andy Fox, but we're going to be looking to recruit to that post very soon. Thanks. So this is the profile of Lincolnshire at a very high level. You can see we've got around 192,000 children and young people in Lincolnshire. We've got the number of open cases there for you to see. So that's the cases that are open to children's services. As a rule of thumb, what I would tell you is the number of open cases in Lincolnshire generally is lower than the national and the regional, which is really good news. It means that we've continued to invest in early help. We support people before they come into the statutory services, and we make sure that concerns don't escalate wherever that's possible. But also what it means for you is that your teams in children's services have lower caseloads, so they can focus intensively on the families that they're working on. It means that on the whole, we can recruit well, because people know coming to work in Lincolnshire means they can be involved in early help, they can have manageable caseloads, and they're part of a team that's doing something that's on the cutting edge of practice. Thank you. We are a directorate, as I've said, that's always focused on moving forward. We're not complacent, and despite being judged outstanding, we continue to champion service-wide development, because we know in this complex service we work in, if we're not making improvements, if we're not going forwards, we're actually going backwards. Our innovation and collaborative working in communities and with other agency places children at the heart of everything we do. We are ambitious, we are future focused, and you can see that through some of the things we've done to date. So for example, we're a partner in practice with the Department for Education, which means they come to us to test out their ideas. We're currently piloting new approaches to SEND inspections, the learning of which will be taken nationally. We're currently working with the National SEND Review Group to look at how what we're doing around our children with SEND and the challenges we are facing and how we're tackling them, how they can be implemented at a wider level. We've got transformation programs in place around our high needs and around our children in care. And as we develop those, they'll come through to you for scrutiny, for you to have a look at in more detail. Our strategic partners engage well when we redesign our services. And that means that we make sure that the services we redesign are right for everyone, right for schools, right for health, right for police. And we work together to understand where there's challenges within that and make sure that staff at the front line have services and systems that they can really, really develop. So from the front line up, we have a commitment to create a culture where our teams can thrive. And from the top down, we're absolutely committed to strategic co-production. Thanks, Tracy. So just very briefly, the relationship between Councillor Bradwell and myself is a really vital one. It's defined in law. So we have some joint responsibilities about the education and children's social services within the local authority. And in Lincolnshire's case, we also have joint responsibilities about the public health functions as well. We are responsible jointly for ensuring that children and young people receive education and children's social care services in our area, and that all children are looked after by the local authority well. And the way in which we do that is to have effective scrutiny, to ensure that we're invite and challenge on the processes that we've got, and to be a learning organisation. Thank you. As elected members, you have an important role to play for children and young people in your area. You'll need to provide support and challenge to me as the Director of Children's Services and to members of the senior management team as necessary. You'll also need to champion the voice of children and young people in all decision making on all the different committees and meetings that you sit. You'll have a role now to really champion children and consider the impact of children on the decisions that are being made. You'll be expected to be visible to children and families, listening to them carefully and helping us to identify gaps in our service or service improvements that are required. However, it is important to remember the boundaries of your role. As I've explained, we work within a very legal framework. Confidentiality is key, and there will be matters that officers can't discuss with you in your elected role, and we'll be honest with you about that. One of the most important roles of elected members is that of scrutiny, and on this committee, you'll be required to scrutinise services to children, young people and their families. And we really welcome robust challenge. And we know we get that through both this committee, our corporate parenting panel and our health and wellbeing board. Thank you. So we have a sharp focus on our priority areas, and these have been agreed as firstly, ensuring our COVID recovery plan is implemented and children and families can come out of this pandemic as strong as they possibly can in Lincolnshire. That involves working with schools and other partners as well, and is an extensive piece of work. Secondly, we're working on system-wide provision for our children with special educational needs. You will have seen in both regional, local, national press, Send is an area of high pressure, and we're working with the DfE and Ofsted on possible innovative solutions. Thirdly, we're reviewing our safeguarding processes right from that early help through to the children in care. Again, an area of national pressure for placements, the cost of placements, and we're at on the front foot in Lincolnshire in responding to these. And finally, we've refreshed our multi-agency early help strategy, and it's in the process of being implemented. I hope that demonstrates to you that despite the pandemic, we have continued to be working on the strategic innovation that you would want us to be. Thank you. So as you can see, Children's Services make up nearly a third of LCC's employees. We're the biggest directorate in terms of the number of employees, and we deliver a wide range of complex services. Our budgets are outlined here. I don't intend to go into the budgets in a huge amount of depth because you will have very detailed papers on the budget coming through and time to absorb them and go into them. But what I would highlight is that our budgets are made up of our children's services budgets, but we also have responsibility for overseeing some of the dedicated school block, which grants funding to schools and academies, as well as other services that schools and academies have asked us to commission. Thank you. So while we've been, I'm sure you've got had lots of questions about potholes whilst you were campaigning. You know, hopefully I've explained to you why this is a great committee to be on. This is a committee that really makes a difference to children and young people in Lincolnshire, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Heather. A very comprehensive overview of children's services. Now it's question time. As I say, Councillor, if you indicate, and Councillor Gray will let me know who wishes to speak, because I may miss people otherwise. Anybody wishes? Oh, I've got some questions.
Mr. Chairman, we've got Councillor Carter indicating to speak.
Thank you. Councillor Carter, your question.
Yeah, it is now. It was purely to say I actually attended the briefing, so I have heard most of that before and I have retained most of it, but it was to particularly highlight how useful it was. But actually since that briefing, I've had a meeting with Martin in regards to education, and also had a couple of other questions for Heather, and it was really to reiterate that actually they are as welcoming as they say, and it's been really, really good for a new councillor, so thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
We've also got Councillor Whittington indicating to speak.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Somebody who's been on children's before in the previous council, I can only really reiterate everything that Heather just said. I mean, this is an outstanding children's service we have in Lincolnshire, and it's one that we can all be very, very proud of. Just really a few bits that I picked up, because in the last council, we're having this big debate around what to call looked after children, because all of us, both on the Children's Scrutiny Committee and also on the Corporate Parenting Panel, thought that looked after children sounded a bit formal, a bit, you know, impersonal. And we discussed options regarding a name change. And I'm really pleased that they're now going to be called Children in Care, and it's actually the children themselves that have come up with that name, because I think that's really, really important. I think it kind of personalises things a lot, so I'm really pleased about that. Just to emphasise the point around corporate parenting, not only are us who are on the Children's Scrutiny Committee corporate parents, but all 70 of us as elected members are corporate parents, and it's really our responsibility to really put children in care. I should use the new designation to really do the best we possibly can for them. I always work on the basis that we want for children in care exactly what we'd want for our own children and grandchildren. And I think if we always bear that in mind, then we won't get too far wrong. Final thing on the send, it's just to show the commitment of LCC. We're spending about £87 million at the moment to increase the send capacity at a variety of schools across Lincolnshire, because obviously there's a demand out there, and it's a demand that we're meeting through increased capacity. My final point is on children's centres, and I'm sure at some point Joe will talk a lot about children's centres. But I visited my local children's centre in Grantham in the last council, and I would heartily recommend all members on this committee make contact, go and visit your local children's centre, and you'll really see the tremendous work that actually goes on at these centres. It's really well worth a visit. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whittington. Some very well-made points. And I think the children and care item is interesting. I seem to recall being at a workshop, I think, with a number of young people and hearing their comments on some of the terminology that's used in the service and how they wanted some things changed. And it was good to hear it from the young people, how they felt they wished to be referred to and so on. So, yeah, a point well made. Councillor Gray, do we have anyone else who wishes to speak?
No, Mr. Chairman, no other councillors indicating to speak.
Thank you very much. Well, I think that's a great introduction, and I know there's an awful lot for particularly newer members to take in. But as Councillor Carter has already said, the officers are very helpful and happy to give you information as you require it. The action that's required of this committee is that we note the presentation that Heather's given us, and can you just raise your hands to indicate that you agree with that? Thank you very much. That's agreed. We now move on to item 6, which is introduction to the Lincolnshire Safeguarding Children Partnership, the LSCP. And the item again is to provide members with an introduction to the work and function of the LSCP. And I'd like to welcome Chris Cook, Independent Chair of the LSCP, and Stacey Walker, LSCP Business Manager, who are attending today via Teams. That's great. And they were going to make a presentation, and then we'll have questions afterwards. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you for inviting us today. I'd just like, before I start my presentation, I'd just like to comment very similar to Heather's comments about we are here to support the new members, and if the new members wanted to contact us on a one-to-one basis or indeed in a group, then we would be quite happy to talk to them in more detail about any matter that they wish to discuss. So I'll leave that open to the new members. Okay, so if I could ask for my first slide to go on. Can members see that? I can't see the council chamber, so I don't know if members can see that.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so I'm Chris Cook. I'm the independent chair of the Safeguarding Children's Partnership for Lincolnshire. And I've got a very important role in that partnership, particularly being independent. I'm there to challenge the agencies, professionally challenge, but to support them as well and ensure that the partnership is properly coordinated. My colleague here today, Stacey Waller, is the business manager, and I always refer to Stacey as the engine room of the partnership. Stacey works hard with her team to bring this together across many agencies, which isn't an easy job to do. So, but she does an excellent job. So if I could have the next slide, please. That's kind, thank you. So as Heather alluded to, we are heavily regulated and we are under the Working Together Safeguarding Children 2018 statutory guidance. And that came about following a review by Sir Alan Wood on multi-agency safeguarding. The reason for that, the Department of Education commissioned Sir Alan Wood, following a number of inspections around the country of safeguarding boards, where a number were judged to be inadequate and a number were judged to be requires improvement. We here in Lincolnshire were inspected at that time and we received a judgment of good, which I was very pleased about. But following those judgments, Sir Alan Wood carried out his review and here we are today under a new statutory guidance of working together, which is a 111-page document actually. So it's very detailed and requires all agencies to work together in this complex world. We are, of course, under the legislation of the Children's Act 2004, which is amended by the Children and Social Work Act 2017, and so we are bound by that legislation. Within all those three elements, there are three key strategic partners within our partnership: the local authority, for obvious reasons, the police, and the health community. Now, the health community is a complex world, but within our framework, the clinical commissioning group takes that role. So there's the three key partners. But having said that, we work with many other partners as well. And at a recent operational meeting, which I chair, there were 21 partners at that meeting. So it shows the commitment county. So if I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So, these are coming up slowly, it appears. So we are an umbrella organisation. We're not an operational, we're not on the front line. We are umbrella. We're there to coordinate. And you can see by this slide the number and the different agencies that we engage with. And I have to say the commitment in Lincolnshire is first class by all the agencies. And so I think it's a really excellent example of partnership working. So if I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So our vision is there before you, that children and young people in Lincolnshire are effectively safeguarded, properly supported, and their lives improved by all agencies working together. It's a very complex world, and it is a changing world, and I'll refer to it later. But as you can imagine, for example, in the digital world that children are experiencing, there are issues for them, and we need to adapt our policies, our procedures to meet their needs in this difficult time. So our overall objectives are to coordinate what is done by each person or body represented on the partnership for the purpose of safeguarding and promoting the welfare of children in the area, and to ensure the effectiveness of what is done. It's no good working hard in today's world and not being effective. And that's where we've got a role to play. And indeed, this scrutiny committee has a very important role to play in that. And I welcome that. I think that's a very healthy situation where we come before scrutiny and can be examined around the effectiveness of the safeguarding partnership. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we have a number of strategic priorities, and you can see the first one is tackling child exploitation. A number of years ago, that was titled sexual exploitation, but the world of exploitation has developed. You will all be aware from some major investigations around the country in different cities that child sexual exploitation had a high profile and still does today. But exploitation is a broad subject now, and the subject matters that are looked at include missing children. Children who go missing on a regular basis are seriously at risk to exploitation, and we need to keep up to date with that. County lines you will have heard of in relation to drugs, and so children are being exploited from time to time in relation to county lines. Children can be trafficked, they can be subject to modern slavery, and I've already alluded to this, there is the digital threat. Enhancing the emotional well-being of children and young people, we've got to look at the impact of social media. Children are engaging in social media on a daily, if not hourly basis. And what impact does that have on them? It has its advantages, but it can have disadvantages as well. and it can impact and create bullying. It can impact on their self-esteem. It's already been alluded to today around psychological issues due to the pandemic, and we need to keep children safe online, and that's very important. So there's a big pieces of work there, and as I've already said, these are all complex areas that we need to manage. The next one then is promoting healthy relationships, and we're looking at understanding the digital threat, developing junior online safety officers, and Stacey will refer to that later in this presentation. And we're looking at education about relationships for children to understand in this world what a healthy relationship is very important to them. They might perceive what a relationship is through other networks, but actually, is it a healthy relationship? And they need to understand that. And indeed, they do. Working together to recognise risk-making behaviours. Being alert to risk is very important in today's society. And we are doing some work on contextual safeguarding. Now, contextual safeguarding is about safeguarding outside the home. It actually looks at communities and the areas that children live in. And we're doing some work with one of the district councils around that. And that's developing, although I think it's been hindered slightly by the pandemic, but it is developing, and it will be an important piece of work. Identify and reduce the impact of neglect on children and young people. A very complex area of work. There is a big difference between neglect of a child and poor parenting. And it's important that the frontline practitioners recognise that, identify with that, and are trained to identify that. And so it's a very important area. There's physical neglect, clearly, emotional neglect, and as I've said, poor parenting. So our training programs are there to assist with that and help frontline practitioners. It's very important for the people on the front line to have the confidence and the knowledge and the expertise to deal with these difficult areas. And then identify and reduce the impact of domestic abuse on children. Domestic abuse is here. We need to deal with it. Children are the collateral damage of domestic abuse. And so we need to work closely with our partners. And the Safer Lincolnshire Partnership currently has the governance of this area, but we work closely with them to assist the children in our county. Thank you. So if we could move to the next slide, please. Well, that is a structure of our organisation, quite a robust structure. Following the Wood Review, we added the assurance to our structure, and that comprises of the three key strategic agencies and myself as the independent chair, and Heather sits on the assurance executive. During the pandemic, we were meeting very regularly to ensure that business as usual. It's very important, even though the pandemic was hindering pieces of work, it was very important that our children were safeguarded, and we ensured that business was as usual. We have a strategic management group, which I chair, and they look at the strategic issues around policies, procedures, budgets, risk. And then we have an operational delivery group, which looks at the more operational matters. And I said earlier, there were 21 members attending a recent meeting. Below those groups, we have a number of subgroups, policies, procedure, education and training, very important. We are heavily regulated. It's important that we have policies and procedures in place, once again, for our frontline practitioners so they can refer to them. And training is crucial to give those practitioners the confidence to deal with these matters. Moving across to the right, the significant incident review group. If we get a significant incident, a serious case in Lincolnshire, these are where partners come together and decide on how to deal with this matter. And we do have, under the regulations, a responsibility to report to a national panel at the Department of Education, and they scrutinise the work that we do around this serious incident. And so it's a very important piece of work. Moving to the right again, an education subgroup. We have close contacts with the schools in Lincolnshire, very important to do that, and we do have members from schools on our education subgroup, and we work with the education department within Heather's directorate as well. So it's a very important subgroup. Moving back to the left on the bottom line, the Child Death Overview Panel. This is a panel chaired by a doctor, and this panel reviews the deaths of children in Lincolnshire. And we've recently received an annual report, and it would appear that in the last year, sadly, we'd had 31 deaths of children throughout the county. When I say that, a lot of those deaths are through natural causes, very sadly. But it's not a case that we have 31 deaths where children are harmed. It's most of those children, as I said, died from natural causes. And then we move to the right, the Child Exploitation and Missing Group. That's chaired by a senior police officer, very important around all those factors of exploitation that I've spoken about. And then we have Quality Assurance, Children's, Adults and Safer Lincolnshire Partnership, QA. We are working a lot more these days with the Adults Board and the Safer Lincolnshire Partnership, which includes the domestic abuse side, to look at how we can work together in terms of audit, in terms of communications, and in terms of training. So that is our what I would describe as a robust structure. I think now I'm going to move over for Stacey to come in, and then we'll take questions at the end, if that's okay, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chairman. So thank you for the introduction, Chris. So I am Stacey Waller. I am the business manager for the LSCP, and it's an honour to kind of be here to kind of present the work that the LSCP does. So as Chris said, we are quite a small team, and you've seen the structure. So what I hope to do with this part of the presentation is just to give members a flavour of the work that we do with our partners. So the learning reviews, so as Chris alluded to, when there are serious incidents, our SIRG group, our Serious Incident Review Group, will consider these and consider if a review is appropriate. So the focus of all the reviews is on learning, and it also considers what can be done to improve the multi-agency working to improve outcomes for children. So this is a system, it's a relatively new system, following the introduction of working together in the Wood Review, and it replaces the serious case reviews, which some members may be more familiar with that language. So this is a new system that we're working with under current arrangements. As Chris alluded to, we offer a wealth of training, and I think for me it's really part of the jewel in the crown in relation to the work that the LSCP does with partners. So we deliver the 6-year pathway as the recommended safeguarding training programme for all of the partners. The pathway is tiered, so depending on the role of the individuals, from taxi drivers and volunteers right up to our social care practitioners within Heather's service, we offer sort of the core training that they attend. It covers exploitation. We have our 2-day safeguarding training, female genital mutilation, domestic abuse, early help, self-harm. So it really is a robust offer to partners. It is generally free for staff as well. So across the partnership, it is funded by the LSCP. Delivery is both virtual and through workshops at the moment, and I'm pleased to say that actually when we went into lockdown, a lot of the training was converted quite swiftly, and so there was no break in relation to the offer for practitioners, and we were able to maintain the offer of that training during the lockdown period, which is an accolade to the training team that sits within the LSCP. our multi-agency child exploitations arrangement, so the MACE. So there was a remodelling in 2019, and the MACE meetings are held off. The operational meeting is held on a weekly basis, and that considers victims, perpetrators, and locations linked to all forms of exploitation. And Chris touched on some of them in relation to children going missing, county lines, criminal exploitation, as well as child sexual exploitation. So from that weekly MACE meeting, data, trends, cases, escalations are all considered at the strategic MACE meeting, and we have governance within that MACE process. And due to lockdown, we explored the combination of the strategic MACE with our child exploitation subgroup, which Chris mentioned as part of our structure. And we're currently working closely with partners to see how we can continue to align those two processes and reduce the impact on partners, because what we do not want to be as an LSCP core team is cumbersome or an extra burden to the partners that we work very closely with. We need to be there to assist and support all the partners in delivering their duties. So we're constantly alert to the impact that we have and how we can support them further. Considering the campaigns, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this on the next slide, but we run campaigns with and across the partnership on local issues. When we have findings from reviews, that may direct a campaign, and any national campaigns as well that we choose to support and mirror. And again, we work across all the partnerships. So we work with our DA colleagues and Adults Board as well, and try and align some of the campaign work that we do to really make sure that messages, the resources and the support are getting out to those people in the communities and those practitioners that need that. Audit work is a big part of our role as well, and the LSCP have a statutory duty under Working Together 2018 to deliver the Section 11 audit across the partnership. This provides assurance that partners are compliant with their responsibilities around safeguarding, including that their policies and procedures are up to date, that the staff training is in place and adhered to, and safer recruitment is being undertaken by those partners. We also deliver a number of other multi-agency audits and then work to implement the recommendations from these across the partnership. So again, a very learning and developmental partnership, and one that is really engaged with that process. Policy and procedures. So the LSCP maintain the procedures manual, which hosts a vast array of policy and procedures, guidance and pathways, again, to support practitioners and to support all of our partner agencies. And we work to ensure that the manual remains up to date, and the majority of that work is done through our policy, procedure, education and training subgroup. Okay, can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so this is just, again, a flavour of some of the work that is going on within and across the partnership at the moment. So the voluntary sector conference, so following on from a joint board review that was completed, there was a recommendation for the LSCP to engage more with the voluntary sector and with faith groups. So originally we had planned a one-day face-to-face conference, but obviously COVID put paid to that. And so the plan developed, we teamed up with the Lincolnshire Safeguarding Adults Board, and we've just completed running a series of 4 sessions over 8 events with the voluntary sector. So the sessions covered an introduction to the LSCP, but also to the Adults Board. It gave advice on how the, It gave advice on how the voluntary sector safeguarding leads could manage allegation. It was around safer recruitment, online safety, and also prevent was some of the topics they were covered. We had 99 attendees across the sessions, and obviously some of them attended all 4 of the sessions. So there was a real enthusiasm for the event, and we have got an evaluation meeting next week with some of those representatives from the voluntary sector to reflect on what we've done, but also then to think about how we move that work forward, recognising that the voluntary sector in our communities play a real key role in relation to supporting children and young people, and often have a high level of engagement with those children and young people. So we need to be alert to how we can support them further. As Chris mentioned, the Junior Online Safety Officers. This is a scheme that was developed by one of my training officers, who sadly isn't with us anymore, but I know that she was particularly proud about this piece of work, and I think rightly so. So the scheme is delivered to Year 5 pupils, so obviously primary school, and children have to attend a session and then complete a series of tests and challenges within their school to earn their JOSO status, at which point they get a certificate and they get a badge, which they're rightly proud of. So since October 2020, it's been delivered virtually. As we'll appreciate, schools have had so much to deal with over the past year, but I think it's fantastic that they've still been able to engage with this JOSO scheme, and we have worked closely with them on the best method of delivery. So at the moment we are delivering that virtually, and then we'll continue to review that with the schools. Engagement on campaigns. So again, this is another piece of work where we really strive to engage with children and young people around the messages that they need to hear and the information that they want and the best way for delivering them. So our last campaign was on healthy relationships, and we're currently engaged with a number of schools. One of my officers is out at William Farr School today, engaging with pupils there around the positive body image campaign. So we engage in focus sessions with the pupils from both primary and secondary schools to explore what they know already around the subject, what they want to know, and how best to deliver these messages. So again, at the forefront, it is children and young people really driving some of this work, which is fantastic. Now, the next slide, please. Okay, so Heather's obviously touched on some of this in relation to the role of the Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee. So whilst today is an introduction to the LSCP and hopefully one that gives members an overview of the work of the partnership, in future meetings, Chris and I will present a more detailed update focusing on the performance of the partnership, including the business plan and the annual report. At this time, the committee will be invited to review and comment on the work of the LSCP. And again, we recognise the important role that the committee plays in providing that challenge and that independent scrutiny. And the final slide. Thank you. So again, just sort of touching on that. So these are some of the other methods of assurance that are in place. So as well as sort of the scrutiny committee, we also have Chris's role as independent chair in relation to holding the partners to account with regards to their duties to contribute and support to the work of the partnership in improving outcomes for children. We have our annual report. The last one was produced in October, so we're working towards producing our next one. And I think the focus, we're going to try and ensure that it is on outcomes for young people. So as well as detailing the work that we do, it is obviously where we are making a difference as well. We do impact assessments around our policies and procedures. So we invite the partners to really demonstrate and showcase the difference that some of the policies and procedures have made to their practice and within their organisations. We're currently developing a performance scorecard that was just signed off at Strategic Management Group last week. So that is very data focused, but from that we are hoping to identify trends and themes which will then drive the work of the partnership. The business plan, the priorities that Chris detailed before, they have been rolled over given the impact of the pandemic on some of those areas, but we will be looking and completing a larger piece of work with colleagues in the Safe Lincolnshire Partnership doing a strategic needs assessment, which again will drive the focus of business moving forward from 2022. And I've already touched on the Section 11 and the audit work and that continual improvement and assurance across the partnership. So I think that's me. So I'd just like to thank you again for the opportunity to present in relation to the work of the LSCP. And as Chris said, we're happy to take any comments or questions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chris and Stacey. And now it's over to members for questions or observations on the two presentations we've had. Hands up for anyone who wishes to raise a question. Certainly.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, because I've sat here and I know all about it and my head feels a bit like it's whirring round, but that could be because I'm a woman of a certain age, I don't know. But I just think it is a lot to take in for members. And I mean, you'll be aware of some of the things that you've heard there today, like child exploitation and all the online bits. But I do just wonder whether I don't know, I was thinking about this, whether you do feed back to the officers about what you feel that you need to know more about. Because this morning, you know, we've been here, what is it now, 11 o'clock, so we've been here an hour and had quite a lot of intensive information about what children's services is like. And I just want to put that to you, that if you felt that actually there was a particular subject that really interests you or you want to know more about, I know you can go to the officers and get an individual briefing, but it might be something that other people, you know, your colleagues might need to know about. So I just, from what you've had today, I just felt it is about you telling the officers what more information you want about something. And I know you can get private briefings, but you know, it is a huge agenda, and you might find that you want to pick up on things during a period of time. But I don't want to frighten you all, and I don't want you all to say, I don't want to be on that committee, I want to do something else now. But because it is just, I just think a bit overwhelming. Now, you might not have thought that today. You might think this is great. I'm really interested in what I've heard, and I'm sure you are. But, you know, we can take things at your pace, and it's up to you to say what more information you want. That's what I'm really just trying to say to you.
Thank you. I think Heather wants to come in.
Yes, I just want to agree with Councillor Bradwell and also say that as the items come through for scrutiny, they'll be on a much smaller piece of it and in a bit more detail, and there'll be a lot more opportunity for discussion as well.
Thanks very much. Yes, it's obviously a very serious and important topic, and there's a responsibility on this committee to properly scrutinise the work of the LSCP. But as Councillor Bradwell has said, you know, we mustn't be frightened by the prospect of undertaking this. And do we have any questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Cleaver is indicating.
Councillor Cleaver, your question, please.
Thank you. And thank you for Mrs. Bradwell's intervention there, which I agree with. One of the things that didn't really come across to me in the presentation or in the paperwork is a sense of scale as to just how large the issue are, how many people are involved, how many children are at risk. So I'd certainly appreciate having more briefings on that side of things.
Thank you. I think some of it will come through in reports, though, if I'm right, from what I can recall. But yeah, it's a good point. Thank you very much. Any other questions?
Councillor Parker next.
Councillor Parker.
Yeah, thanks. Something that you said, Trish, prompted me. I chair the Car Home Community Forum, which is a bringing together of local people, the police, and a variety of agencies. And one of the things that keeps on cropping up, in fact, most of the time, is in relation to young teenagers cycling around the area late at night, clearly involved in moving drugs about. Now, it's not huge, but it's permanently ongoing, and the police, the local community police officer talks to us about it, and yes, things get done. That's what we might call, I'm going to say, the criminal, potentially criminal side, but I can't help but feel that there is a social care element to kids that are actually 13, 14, 15 biking around. So it's not just about what we might call arrest and punish, if that's the language to use on one side. It's about actually diverting them away from that behaviour. Now, this isn't recent. This is, you know, we're talking about years, and it isn't that prevalent so much that it's easy to handle. And I just wonder about that sort of thing that seems to me to be an issue in the area that I've got, which is, I'm not saying unsolvable, but what do we do about it?
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Heather, did you want to come back on that?
Well, I was just going to suggest that perhaps Chris would want to come in first, and then Joe Kavanagh could come in and talk a little more. Thank you.
Over to you, Chris.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, it clearly, I didn't is it drugs connected? I'm sorry, Councillor Parker, I had a problem with my signal, I think. Were you suggesting it was drugs related?
Almost certainly, because there's not and a lot of reasons for a 13 or 14-year-old to be out at 10 o'clock at night cycling like mad around the West End.
Yes, of course. We as a children's partnership don't have governance for a drug strategy, but we do work with the Safer Lincolnshire Partnership, who do. And I think it's probably something that Safer Lincolnshire Partnership, with their partners around drugs, should be looking at.
Thank you. Joe.
Yeah, I was just going to say, really, in terms of, from a Children's Services response to that kind of behaviour that you've mentioned, Councillor Parker, we do have a service called Future for Me. So some of you that have been in this part of this committee for a while will be familiar. And part of that, we have a strong initiative called the Joint Diversionary Panel. It's a joint initiative with Lincolnshire Police. We've had reports at Scrutiny here on a number of occasions before, and it always generates lots of conversation. So really it is very much around that getting in early, identifying young people that are perhaps at risk of coming into the criminal justice system or maybe being exploited by other older adults, identifying them and trying to keep them out of the criminal justice system by putting in really effective multi-agency support, because often the behaviour that might be seen as antisocial or criminal is often the very tip of a bigger iceberg underneath, if that makes sense. And often it's young people taking on board lots of other issues relating to their family circumstances, maybe not attending school. So we have a multi-agency partnership to wrap around that support. So perhaps outside of this meeting, Councillor Parker, I could have an email conversation with you about the specifics of the instance you're raising, and just make sure that our staff are also aware and are engaged in what we might do supportively, because there are other positive activities that we can put in place for young people. You won't be surprised to hear they've been massively impacted in the last 12 months around what we're able to do, but even during the most strictest of lockdowns, we've been able to offer one-to-one support to young people where they've needed it. So I will have an email conversation with you about the specifics and see what we can do. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I believe Councillor Bradwell wishes to come in as well.
Yes, because Stephen and I's new role is the Safer Lincolnshire Partnership. And what I just wanted to say was I've got Di Coulson, who leads on the Safer Lincolnshire Partnership. She's putting together, because we've discussed going around every partners, all the partners and what they're doing. And actually antisocial behaviour is one of my key things, because like you, Rob, even in lovely Woodhall Spa, we have little things like you've just described going on. So I believe that is an issue. So we're going to go round and have a look, but we are also reviewing all the things, that high priorities for the Safer Lincolnshire Partnership. That will be coming forward as well. So I think, I say, Stephen and I are quite keen to get in there to see what all the agencies are doing, and how that interacts with our council priorities as well, like we've just heard today with children, but it's the same with adults as well who've got problems. So I don't know whether we could bring something back or let you know a briefing how we get on, but I do think there is, we can't always be doing and having the same priorities, can we? Life changes and life moves on, and different areas have different problems. But I do think what you've explained, a number of people in this room today might say, yes, that's happening in my area as well. So we just need to understand if we need to refocus things on the Safer Lincolnshire Partnership Board.
Thank you, Councillor Bradwell. Councillor Gray, do we have any other questions?
Yes, Councillor Carter is next to speak.
Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chairman. I think what I didn't get from the report is what to actually credit LSCP with. So you've said you collect data and that drives then campaigns. But actually in Holbeach, I know Soldas do amazing work in regards to domestic abuse. Obviously Boston based, but they work in Holbeach. I know the schools are fabulous, but actually, is it behind it, those campaigns that they are doing? Is it work of LSCP? But they're not getting the credit for it, but they're driving that forward. So I think that's what I'm missing, because I know I haven't seen your logo or anything in Holbeach telling me that it's you delivering that to me. So that for me is what's missing from what I've gained today.
Heather?
I was just going to suggest you went to Chris for that. I'm just conscious of them.
Chris, can you respond to that, please?
Yeah, well, yes, certainly, Chairman. I mean, lots of agencies do work independently of us and carry out their own campaigns. And it's almost impossible for us to coordinate every agency within the county. As I've already alluded to, we've got many organisations that we coordinate, but not all, and it would be impossible to do that. But what we try to do is link into many organisations and support them, but we don't always look to take the lead. I don't think as a partnership we should lead everything. I think individual agencies actually should take the lead, particularly if they're on the front line. The voluntary sector conferences were very important because in the past, the voluntary sector have had difficulties with engagement. We've had difficulties with them. And so this is something brand new, and we're looking to develop it next year. So we're spreading our wings further to actually link in to more organisations. The voluntary sector plays such an important part in the local communities and work hard in difficult circumstances. And we respect that. And we'll be looking to develop that even further next year.
Thanks, Chris. Stacey, did you wish to add anything to that or not?
No, I think Chris has kind of answered that. But again, it's maybe something that we can focus on when we come back in November. So definitely around actually some of those key messages that we have shared, if that is something that would be of interest to the committee.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gray, do we have any further questions?
Yes, Heather was just indicating to come in on that, actually.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to reassure Councillor Carter, what will happen when we get into the cycle of things is you'll have an annual report, and the annual report, rather than this kind of introductory session, will say this is what's happened this year, this is what's been done, this is the impact that we've had. So as we move through, and probably we can share the last annual report with you so you can have a little look at the work that went on. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know whether I could just come in and make a comment, please. Thank you.
Yes, by all means, Chris.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll go back to Councillor Bradwell's comments about the complexity of all this and gaining an understanding in difficult times. In the past, we have had members of, when there was a scrutiny subgroup, the council members of that, from time to time, did attend our meetings to observe our meetings. And what I would invite you and your colleagues, you are very welcome if you want to organise for a councillor to attend our meetings and observe it, which may help them in gaining a greater understanding of the business.
Thank you very much for that invitation, Chris. I think that's something we need to look into and see about taking up. Thank you very much for that. Do we have any further questions?
We've got Councillor Blackburn.
Councillor Blackburn.
Yeah, thank you. Listening to Councillor Bradwell, I was interested, the junior online safety, I wondered if it'd be possible as a group for us to actually see what message we are putting across to the children and what sort of age group we're rolling it out, because it's a big part of their lives, and I would like to see actually what they're getting and at what age they're getting this.
That's a very good point. If we can have some of that, will that come from Stacey?
Yes, absolutely. It is year 5 primary age children that goes out to, but I'm sure it's Eleanor and Dan Horbrook that actually go out and deliver that on behalf of the LSCP. So I'm sure that they would either be prepared to come to the next committee meeting and do a short input for yourselves around that, or we could arrange for something outside of the meeting if that's something that members would be interested in. They can maybe run through that with yourselves. Absolutely, it's something that we are particularly proud of, so would welcome that opportunity.
Thanks very much, Stacey. I think that's something we may wish to have, being very aware that, of course, we've got quite a number of people who are new to the committee, so more information might be welcome in the future. Thanks very much. Do we have any further questions, Councillor Gray?
No further speakers, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I think that's been a very informative presentation, and obviously there's a lot of serious stuff in that we need to get our heads around. I would like to propose that we note the report and the presentation, and please can you raise your hands if you agree? Thank you very much. And taking a cue, as it were, from Councillor Bradwell about we've taken an awful lot of information in. As I said earlier, I'd like to propose we have a 10-minute break and we resume at 11:25 by my watch. So you can grab a coffee, clear your head so we can focus on the next item. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Chairman.
Thank you, Tracy. We now move to agenda item number 7. This is the extension to the Best Start Lincolnshire Early Years and Family Service contract. This item is for pre-decision scrutiny prior to a decision by the Executive on the 6th of July this year, and the committee is being consulted on a proposed decision by the Executive to extend the contract for the Best Start Lincolnshire Early Years and Family Service with Preschool Learning Alliance for up to a maximum of 12 months. Now, the committee has the opportunity today to provide advice, recommendations or comments for the Executive's consideration before it makes its decision on the 6th of July. And I'd like to welcome Charlotte Gray, Head of Children's Strategic Commissioning, who's here in the Council Chamber today to present the report. I'd also like to welcome Sarah Gregory, Commissioning Manager, Children's Strategic Commissioning, who's attending via Teams, hopefully. Over to you, Charlotte.
Thank you, Chairman. Morning, everybody. So yes, we are proposing to make an exception to the Council's contract regulations to extend the Best Start Lincolnshire Early Years and Family Service contract for up to a year. We're seeking the committee's support for the recommended option and comments prior to Executive. So the Best Start Lincolnshire service contract is due to end in June 2022. And it can't be extended any further under the existing terms and conditions of the contract. The service supports the Council to deliver statutory duties, which are set out in the paper that you've got. It provides early years education support for children who are aged 0 to 5 and their families, and it helps with children's development, their readiness for school, and supports positive parenting skills. The service is mainly delivered from children's centres around the county. The service has been consistently rated as good throughout the contract time that we've had in place with the provider. So we started reviewing this service because it was coming to an end in August 2020 as we'd planned. However, that work, the work on the review is behind schedule. Mainly because staff have had to focus on other COVID response work, and during the pandemic we've had a bottleneck really created of other delayed work since the pandemic started, which has increased work volumes overall. The Best Start Lincolnshire service was really impacted by the pandemic as children's centres had to stop face-to-face activity with the exception of essential health visitor checks and midwifery checks. And so the Best Start Lincolnshire services had to move to a virtual delivery only, which, as I'm sure you'll appreciate, isn't really ideal for children aged 0 to 5. And it doesn't really allow parents to create the peer networks that they would normally create in person in the same way. I would like to just state, though, now that those services are beginning to be delivered face-to-face in line with government guidance. So we're not at a point where it's all virtual still. The pandemic also delayed the publication of the Public Health England Healthy Child programme, which has many interdependencies with this review and the service that we need to factor in to the design of the new service going forward. There are parts of the current service model that we know do need some development and updating, and we've been really concerned about rushing the review and procurement without fully considering these changes, and also any changes to the services that may be needed for families as we move out of the pandemic. This age of children have missed out on so much social interaction that they would normally experience as a result of the pandemic, and many development opportunities really. And as I've said, parents haven't really had those peer support networks in the same way. We've done our very best, but things have been different. And I think what we're likely to see coming off the, off the back of the pandemic is a greater universal need of support for all families with children in their very early years. And we've been really fortunate. What I would just say, and Councillor Whittington sort of noted with me over the break, that we've been really lucky in Lincolnshire that we've been able to provide a really good level of universal support to families. There's a very, very strong evidence base that, you know, if you invest and spend a lot of time working with families on the development of children in their very early years, the health benefits and the benefits for later in life are massive. And in Lincolnshire, we've really protected that strong offer for all families. Without the extension, the new model and its development, engagement with families and decision making will need to be completed by December this year to allow time for a procurement to take place for the new service. And these timescales can't currently be met because of the pressures that I've just described to you. And as such, we're seeking an exception of up to 12 months to allow time for us to complete the review properly. Not doing so does pose a risk of putting the wrong service in place, which may not meet need and would be an ineffective use of council resources. The legal advice is that this exception would be allowed under the Public Contract Regulations 2015 and that this isn't a substantial modification to the contract. The view is that this has a low risk of challenge and that every intention is there to complete a full open competitive tender process at the end of this period. Allowing the extension will provide a continuity of services and support the council to still meet its statutory duties whilst we complete the review thoroughly and as necessary. The value of the extension is up to £1.871 million. And the funding of that is available within the current budget and wouldn't create a cost pressure to the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Councillor Gray, do we have any speakers?
No speakers indicated, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I think Councillor Parker wishes to speak.
I suppose. Excuse me. Here we are, in June 2021, and we're talking about a period up until 2023. Okay. I'm just interested in you giving us some indication of the process that we're going to be going through in terms of this evaluation in order to bring us into a position where we're not being rushed. Now that period is 2 years, getting on for 2 years. How, one, the continuation of the services, okay, will we be able to deliver to quality and will the world be changing while we're going through this process? And it just seems to me that we are status quo maintenance is one good thing in order to have a contract in place, but I just wonder about how we're adapting to the changing world during that period of time.
Absolutely. Okay, so what I would say is that we've worked an awful lot with the current service provider, as I'm sure you can imagine, to deliver services in a really different way during the pandemic. And all of our commissioned services alongside our own are having to be really, really flexible about the way that they deliver. And as we hopefully move to a place where we can deliver the services, you know, very much in the way that we would normally deliver services, there's a lot of flexibility built into the contract. So we're working to look at the needs of families and what are families telling us now about what's happening and what they need now in terms of social interaction. And so it won't affect, families will still get their needs met. I'm confident there's nothing within the existing service delivery in the contract that would restrict us from being able to respond to the needs of families as we're seeing them come out of the pandemic. So that would be my first sort of comment around, are we restricted by what we've currently commissioned and therefore potentially unable to meet need for another 2 years? I definitely think that we've got the flexibility and a really strong relationship with the current provider to adapt to meet the needs that we're seeing at any given point. And then I think there's something around the process. It seems like a really long time, but actually the procurement activity itself, there are a lot of regulated timescales that have to be followed, and some of our statutory duties require, if we're potentially looking at any changes, that we have to undertake a meaningful engagement with families around children's centres. So we really want to make sure that we've got the time to take into consideration any emerging evidence that's coming out around the needs of families, the Healthy Child programme, which we've got mandated actions that we have to consider, and also the views of families, so that we can then represent to yourselves in Scrutiny and Executive what that new model will be to meet need for many years to come. And that, unfortunately, does take time, and we need at least 6 months following procurement, really, to then implement a new service if we were to get a new provider that was successful in their bid.
Councillor Bradwell will be aware very clearly that we've had financial problems in the past, and one of the issues has been around the survival of children's centres, and you've always protected children's centres. There's no suggestion as though within the way forward that there's any risk of children's centres, any risk to children's centres.
In terms of the scope of the review that we're looking at, we're not looking at any. We're looking at keeping the continued support that we have within Lincoln's children's centres. We're looking at, obviously, are there any, and this isn't about children's centres as buildings at all, but we do always look at what's the best use of the council's resource based on evidence to meet need, but that the use of children's centres isn't part of the scope of what we're looking at. It's very much the services that are being run from children's centres.
Thank you, Charlotte. I think Heather wished to come in.
Yeah, just to reassure the committee. So this is about, we've got a whole set of services for these very young children, and some of them have come on board since we last procured this service. So, and the changes to health visiting that are being suggested nationally are something we want to consider before we re-procure this. So it's not about taking anything away at this point, it's making sure we're using that and getting the right service that doesn't duplicate something we've now got in another area, but it builds on and strengthens the provision that we've got. So it's to allow us to integrate the kind of pathway we have for early years.
Chairman, could I also say, and I'm always putting pressure on Heather, because during the pandemic, my children's centres, a lot of them were taken over by midwives and, them having their checks and that, weren't they, Heather? And I keep saying to her, when are we going to get those children's centres back? But at the moment, it's too early, because they're doing outside activities, but because some of the children's centres are really small, we won't be able to have, family groups in. But our children's centres have been a godsend to health, because it stopped pregnant mums having to go into our main hospitals, and their antenatal services and that were delivered from our children's centres. And I think that also shows how we adapt to we've adapted to the pandemic, that actually trying to keep mums safe. And, when we were in the first lockdown, people were really, really worried about actually entering. Well, you weren't allowed to enter a hospital, really, were you? But, it helped mums be able to go to their local children's centre to have some checks done. And that's continuing, isn't it? We just need to see how we can work with that continuing, because it's much better that mums are able to just go to somewhere local to have checkups and that than have to go to Lincoln or Boston or wherever.
Thank you, Councillor Bradwell. I think, Joe, you wish to come in.
Just really quickly, just to say, following on from Councillor Bradwell's comments, we are, and as Charlotte has said, we are getting delivery back up in centres. There is a lot of demand. Parents and carers want to be in the centres, and more than we're able to manage at the moment, because, as you can imagine, having a baby during the last 12 months has been incredibly difficult in terms of having access to support and networks. So I've pulled together a briefing in anticipation of your questions. So I will circulate that via Tracy probably early next week, and within that there'll be all the links so that you can find your local children's centre, as well as an update on what's being delivered in them, and links to individual Facebook pages and things for your centres. Okay.
Thank you, Joe. That's very helpful. I think we look forward to receiving that. Councillor Gray, do we have any further questions?
Yes, Councillor Whittington wishes to speak.
Councillor Whittington.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr Chairman. This paper that Charlotte's presented this morning went before the Commissioning and Commercial Board earlier in the week, of which I'm a member. And certainly the view of the board was our support for this, largely for some of the reasons that Charlotte outlined. The importance of this early intervention work. There is a considerable amount of evidence out there that by investing in these services for children between 0 and 5 really does prevent a lot more intervention later on in life. It's a case of and I think that came out in the presentation that Heather made in her pyramid that she made. It's really important to get in there early, at early years. So from the point of view of the children and their parents, there's great evidence out there that this early intervention stuff really works. So it's great for the children, and actually it's great for the council, because if the evidence suggests that if children don't receive this intervention early on, later in life, the interventions that councils do use are a lot more expensive, a lot more resource intensive than the early years. So it's a case of X being the spend on early years, and Y being the spend that we'd have to incur later on in life. X is a lot smaller than Y. So it makes sense also from a financial point of view, as well as a service provision point of view, and actually is beneficial for both the children and the parents. So it's a win-win. This budget, the amount of resource that's involved here is within the existing budget that the service has. So it's financially affordable. It makes sense, and I think, to re-emphasise the point, it allows children's services to sort of do that in-depth work that we actually do need to sort of pick up all of the changes in this service. Because certainly from our perspective, I think, we really value our children's centres. I know that those parts of the country that no longer have children's centres don't have the same ability to intervene early on in the lives of these very vulnerable young children. And certainly our commitment is to maintain children's centres, because we value them incredibly, and to maintain the services that they provide. So I would encourage all members to support this paper. Thank you, Mr Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Whittington. Councillor Gray, do we have any further questions?
No other speakers, no.
Thank you. Just if I can remind members of the committee that the actions required of us are to consider the attached report and determine whether the committee supports the recommendation to the executive as set out in the report, and to agree any additional comments to be passed to the executive in relation to this item. And again, to remind you, the recommendation to the executive is as follows: that the executive approves an extension to the contract for the Best Start Lincolnshire Early Years and Family Service with Preschool Learning Alliance for up to a maximum of 12 months from the 1st of July 2022 to the 30th of June 2023, 9 months initially to the 31st of March 2023, whilst the commissioned Early Years Services review is concluded. And comments from the committee's discussion this morning on the report have been recorded by Tracy Johnson, Senior Scrutiny Officer, to be passed on to the executive. And I propose that we support the recommendation. Please, may I have a seconder?
I'm very happy to second, Mr Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. We'll now vote on this item. You are voting on whether you support the recommendation to the executive and agree to provide the additional comments to the executive. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Those against? Abstentions? Thank you. That recommendation is supported. Thank you very much for that. We now move on to item 8. which is the Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee Work Programme. Now, this item sets out our work programme for 21-22, and I'd like to invite Tracy Johnson to present the report. Over to you, Tracy.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, this report sets out the future agendas for the committee. This is the proposed agendas at the moment. There may be changes as we go through the year where some items might be moved or additions may be added, but at the current moment, this is what your future agendas look like. I have one amendment to make to the work programme. At the Overview Scrutiny Management Board meeting on the 17th of June, it was agreed to request that each scrutiny committee identifies potential topics for in-depth scrutiny reviews, which will be then put forward to the board at its meeting on the 30th of September. So a report and proposals for scrutiny reviews will be brought to the committee at its next meeting on 16th of July, and this is to enable members to identify any suggestions for the in-depth scrutiny reviews for consideration by the board in September. So in addition to your agenda on the 16th of July, we also have the Q4 service performance against the corporate performance framework, so that'll be from Joe. We also have 2 pre-decision reports, so similar to what we've just had. Both of these are exempt as they're in relation to special schools and contracts, and these are relating to the expansion of St Christopher School in Lincoln and the expansion of the primary school in Spalding. Both of these reports relate to the Building Schools for Specialist Communities strategy. So what I'll do is I'll find out the decision report that went through on that sets out the strategy and circulate it to members before the next meeting, so just to familiarise yourself as to what the strategy is all about. So it'll just help inform with those 2 items. And then the meeting after that is the 3rd of September. We have an update on the Family Adoption Links, which is the new regional adoption agency, which was established last year. And we also have the Q1 performance report, and also another report relating to the special school strategy in relation to the expansion of St Lawrence's School in Horncastle. That's it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Tracy. Yes, I think it's important, and I'm sure Councillor Parker will agree that we look into something that can have a deep dive in scrutiny terms in September. Yeah. Any comments anyone wishes to make on the programme? No? Again, we're invited, or required of us, I should say, to review and agree the work programme as set out in the report. Well, I think we've done that, and to highlight for discussion any additional scrutiny activity that could be considered for inclusion in the work programme. I appreciate that, obviously, for new members, it's something perhaps we wouldn't do initially now, but as we go on through the course of the year, that will probably come to your mind as you've become more familiar with the work of the committee. I therefore propose that the work programme is agreed, or if you'd show your hands if you agree. Thank you very much, that's agreed. I'd like to thank everyone for their participation this morning. It's very unusual circumstances. It's the first time I've chaired this meeting in this situation with the teams running in the background and all of us spread out for social distancing purposes, which perhaps can make things a little difficult. But I thank you for your participation and your involvement, and I look forward to seeing you at the next meeting. Thank you very much.